Welcome to the Power of Nature podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Waldo. In this show, I talk about how connecting with nature and the natural world can help us connect with our true selves and our own personal power. I share stories of how I've learned to do this as part of a regular and ongoing practice, and I talk to others about how they do the same. So join me as we go on a journey of learning about the power of nature and the impact that it can have on our own lives. Welcome to the first episode of the Power of Nature podcast. In this first episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about myself, what I intend to do with this podcast, and why I started it. To see if you resonate with this, and this is a journey that you might want to go on as well. It's really a journey of reflecting on the power that nature can have in our lives and in our own sense of self, our well-being, our health, our connection to our own knowing, and so many more benefits that I can't even describe, but I know that will come up over the course of this show. So I think to get started, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I currently live in an amazingly stunning part of the United States in the state of Montana, northwestern Montana, near Glacier National Park. So we have mountain ranges around us. As a matter of fact, the house that we live in, I have a view right out of my office that I'm recording in right now of an amazing mountain right in front of us. And it's part of a mountain range, or a range of mountains that extends north up into Canada and up into towards Glacier National Park. And living here, I really get to see and experience the power of nature all the time. We are fortunate to have a property that has amazing trees on it. We have kind of a combination of some woods and some more open spaces. So we have all kinds of wildlife that passes through on our property. Lots of deer, but lots of birds and eagles and hawks and woodpeckers and all kinds of birds. We have turkeys, wild turkeys. We have seen grouse on this property, or pheasants, actually. I think it's been both. I saw a fox once, so I know there are foxes living here, skunks, and all kinds of other creatures. Actually, I'm not quite sure about the skunk, but I smelled what smelled like a skunk, so I'm imagining they're around. We also have our own menagerie of animals on this property. We have horses, and currently 4, 3 that we own and 1 that we're kind of doing a borrowing of sorts. So 4 horses, and we have chickens, 10 chickens that we just got as chicks. And the thing about living here is that it's like there's an amazing restorative thing on this property, from the trees, from the mountains, from the air, from seeing geese when they fly over, or eagles or hawks or seeing woodpeckers or having deer or a fawn in our backyard, that just has an effect on me that goes beyond words. It goes beyond kind of a description of how it can kind of help me tune into a sense of well-being within myself, a sense of connection with myself, and a sense of empowerment that comes really from within and connecting with the natural world. And that's what I'm going to be talking a lot about in this podcast. I'm going to be talking a lot about just sharing my experiences as I live on this property and, connect with nature. And my intention with doing so is to kind of see if it resonates with you in your connection with nature, your connection or possible connection that you could deepen, that you might have or you might find can grow. I know that my connection with nature has evolved over many, many years, and it's transformed a lot. And I feel like by sharing some of the stories of what I've experienced and what I'm experiencing now, that those who resonate with that and can, tune into that knowing within themselves, that it may help you as a listener deepen your own connection with nature and your own connection with your own well-being and wellness that nature can help you tune into. So I'm going to be talking about stories of my connection with nature as a child, as a younger adult, and continuing to current day, how I connect with nature and what kinds of practices that I do and the impact that it has on my life. And I guess that's kind of something I wanted to touch on in today's episode, which is I was sitting, as I often do in the morning, and I do some journaling in the morning. We have the view of the mountain that's in my office. We also have it in our living room. So I often sit in our living room and I have a cup of tea and I look at the mountain and I journal and I just kind of reflect on whatever is coming up for me. And one of the things that came up in my awareness today was kind of how, as a child, I had seen some photos of myself as a baby, and there's kind of like I don't know, like an unsettledness that I could see in those photos until I started connecting with nature. And I could see it in the change. Now, for me, one of the biggest ways that I started connecting with nature first was through horses, actually. Horses and ponies got me to get out into nature. So there are 3 avenues of my life that I feel like have been really powerful in my life. And horses and ponies are one of them. So I have podcasts and offerings related to that. Nature is huge, and that's what this is about. And then also my own creativity. understanding my creativity, exploring my creativity, allowing my creativity. And that journey has evolved over many years to now where one way that I express my creativity and explore my creativity these days is as a painter. But I've done it through many other avenues in the past as well. But nature is something that kind of runs through the thread of all of those things these days, because my paintings are of nature. I do completely abstract paintings that relate to nature, and I do abstract landscapes, very much informed by the mountains around me and beautiful mountainous places and places in nature that have inspired me, that I've traveled to or I've visited over the course of my life. Nature has also been a part of, as I mentioned, my connection with horses, that I've done a lot with horses, but really where I've always found the greatest benefit of horses is when I'm just with horses in nature, being present. Now, I've done a lot of things with horses. I've done a lot of training of horses and showing of horses and competing with horses and all of that. And it was fun. But really what I find these days, and what I find has always really benefited me, was when I was just in nature and with my horses. Even this morning, I went out to feed them, and it's just being in the trees. It's just being in the woods. It's just leading them to a new pasture and, feeding them and getting water for them, and, stopping to see a hawk or, geese flying overhead or a bird nearby, or to observe the trees. These are the kinds of things that I'm going to be talking about in this podcast. So there may be some overlap with some of my other areas of focus, which are horses and creativity. But this podcast is really about the power of nature in our lives, the power that it can have on us, the natural world. I feel like as a child, I was kind of afraid of nature. It was like, oh, the scary woods, or, oh, scary nature is unpredictable. And what I've learned over the years is that nature is nothing to be scared about, and everything to slow down and allow ourselves to dive into our connection to it, because it's a spiritual thing. It really connects us with kind of unknown parts of ourselves and unknown answers and energies, and, like I said, a sense of well-being that can just come from our connection with nature. So I'm going to be talking about all these things in this show. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things when I was journaling today was kind of realizing that as a child, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I was born in a part of Pennsylvania that didn't have a lot of natural nature. I mean, you could say that there's nature everywhere, right? There's lawns and grass and trees and stuff. But to me, I feel like there is something really different about nature that is just completely wild, and nature that is, plants and trees that are more like, domesticated, or, planted by us, or manicured by us in many cases. So that's the kind of nature that I had exposure to in Pennsylvania when I was first born. There were lawns and there were trees and there was grasses or there were grasses, and I didn't really feel any connection really to them. And then my family moved their business to central Pennsylvania, where there are, mountains and more woods, and it was less populated. It was a more rural area in a small town as opposed to a suburb of Pittsburgh. Well, I wasn't really born in a suburb of Pittsburgh, but it was kind of like a town that was just beyond where the suburbs were. So it's kind of still had that kind of feel. And when we moved to central Pennsylvania, my parents' business, we moved to a more rural area. And my sister, I talk about this in my horse-related podcast, my sister got into ponies because there was a farm across the way, and there was a pony that was just kind of sitting there. And my sister got into riding that pony, and ponies, I then got into ponies and horses at a young age. I think the first time I was on a pony was probably around 3 or 4, and then I started riding around age 5. And what started to happen was, I think that through the connection of ponies and horses, it's like when you get on a pony and a horse, or a pony or a horse, you ride out, right? Like you either ride in a ring or you ride out on a trail. And so we would just kind of ride out like in fields and on trails, and just wherever we could ride. And wherever there wasn't like a lawn in somebody's property, more like farmland and that sort of thing, where we were allowed to ride. And so I started to kind of get out into nature on the back of a pony, and started to like just be out and see deer, and be out and see plants, and be out and, just kind of without an agenda. And I don't think that if I had stayed in the part of Pennsylvania where I originally was born, I don't think that I would have developed the connection with nature that I have now if I hadn't moved to central Pennsylvania and gotten involved with the ponies and horses. The ponies and horses kind of led me to a connection with nature where I started to just, go into nature and just kind of slow down, if you will, like discover the connection of just seeing a butterfly, just being on my pony and riding in a grassy field, seeing the sunset, seeing the sunrise, all the kinds of things that now, as part of my connection with nature, I know that I enjoy, and I embrace it as part of my practice. But as a little girl, I feel like ponies gave me kind of like an opportunity to get out without an agenda and to start discovering nature, and how it was like a lifeline for me. I feel like it just really connected me to myself, to my own self, to my own energy. I know it's definitely been a source of my own creativity, and I feel like there is such power in nature that this is really what I want to talk about in this show. I want to talk about the power of nature and what it can do for our health and our well-being, how I've experienced that, how I continue to experience it, and I actively embrace doing that as part of a practice of the way that I choose to live now. How I've learned that nature is free medicine, really. It is free medicine for our souls and our hearts and our bodies. And that when we can learn to slow down and connect with it, and be present and start tuning into the power of nature, it can change us. It can change us in many different ways, beneficial ways. And it's certainly changed me. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. And I also want to talk to other people about their experiences doing this as well, because I know I'm not alone for sure. I think that we're all being called to connect with the natural world more. And explore how that connection can deepen our own sense of peace and wellness and well-being and just okayness within ourselves. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this show. And I'm really excited about it and looking forward to sharing this with you. I feel like I should maybe just give a little bit of a highlight of some of the places that I've been and some of the places I've lived, so you have a little bit of a background on me. So as I said, I currently live in Montana. If someone said to me, you're going to live in Montana someday, I would have been like, where is Montana? And what do you mean? I never expected it. And I didn't really know anything about Montana, but such is the power of nature and another thing I'm going to be talking about. But as I mentioned, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I was born in the western part of Pennsylvania, north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then I grew up in central Pennsylvania between State College and Harrisburg, and in a small town, small blue-collar town. And then I went back to college. I went back to Pittsburgh. I went to college in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, got my 4-year degree and at a liberal arts college there. And over the summers, I spent a couple of summers, 2 or 3, can't quite remember, in North Carolina, in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And that was amazing because it was an opportunity to really connect with the ocean and connect with nature. Now, I had been to the ocean. I'd been to like Ocean City, New Jersey and Ocean City, Maryland, and I think Rehoboth Beach. But those are very, I don't know how they are now, but I know when I was a kid, they were pretty commercial. So, it was like a lot of like really developed boardwalks and, beaches with tons of people and all of that. And so when I, in the period when I was in college, which is a long time ago now, so maybe things have really changed. But when I was in college and I spent some summers in the Outer Banks, I was waiting tables, waitressing to earn money for the school year because I worked full-time through the school year and over the summers for college. And when I was in the Outer Banks, it was different. It was different than the kind of the mid-Atlantic state coasts that I had been exposed to, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, that sort of thing. It was more kind of wild, kind of more natural. We had, you have hurricanes there, so we had some hurricane warnings. There was just much more of kind of like the natural world there, I felt like. And I had a lot of time, during the day, because I mostly worked in the evenings, to spend time on the beach and listening to the ocean and connecting with the waves. And also the ocean there is very different. Or at least it was a big place for surfing because there's a lot of strong currents and tides, which can make swimming very different. You see a lot of, really big boats. I had the opportunity to go out on a huge sport fishing yacht and be really far out, in the ocean with that. And I really had a very different experience with the ocean there, and it was pretty amazing. So I spent time there. I've spent time in Florida just visiting people, and I didn't really connect as much with nature there because I was in really kind of commercial parts of Florida. After college, I went to Europe, actually. I went on a backpacking trip across Europe, and so I got to connect with nature, not so much nature, in England, in France. Actually, in France I did, because in France I had the opportunity to go to the French Alps, to a town called Chamonix, which was really my first experience experiencing alpine mountains and like huge mountain ranges, because I hadn't been exposed to that. And that was amazing. That had a massive effect on me, and all the different lifestyle changes that I made after that. So that was amazing being there. I also spent some time in Italy. I lived in Rome, Italy for a while. I ended up stopping my backpacking trip and settling into Rome. And I didn't get too much connection to nature there. The big park, Villa Borghese. I did spend time there, and that really was kind of like a lifeline for me while I was there. But I did have the fortune of traveling south and going to the island of Capri and seeing some of the coastal cities. Along the water in Italy, and that really influenced me. It really wasn't kind of the connection with nature, though, that I feel like has always been deep in my soul, which is mountains and conifer trees and lakes and like really, really wild nature. And I would say that my experiences in the French Alps were the strongest influence on that trip. But that actually, there was a time where I had to return to the United States. I wasn't able to stay in Italy any longer, and I went back to my hometown and tried to figure out what I was going to do and reassess what was happening. And I spent a lot of time in nature, imagine that, in Pennsylvania, to kind of just figure out what to do next. My plans, I had plans to move somewhere, and it hadn't worked out. I'm not going to go into that right now, but it ended up that I ended up feeling a really strong call to go visit San Francisco, California, which I'd never been to and I didn't know anything about, but I had an opportunity to go there. And I went on a trip there, and I just had a massive sense of knowing that that is where I needed to move. And so I went back and went back to Pennsylvania, and I spent about 3 months saving up money. And then I moved to San Francisco, California, by myself in a car. I had no job, no friends, no connections in San Francisco, other than just a very strong vision and awareness that that's where I needed to live. And one of the big things that was calling me was I had passed through the Sierra Nevada mountains on the way to San Francisco. Well, actually, I can't say that. I didn't know about those when I first went to visit. But when I moved to San Francisco, and I drove across country, I felt kind of an awakening of my soul when I passed through the Sierra Nevadas, through the Lake Tahoe area on Highway 80. And what I ended up doing when I lived in San Francisco, California is, I was connecting with nature a lot. There's a lot of different natural nature places, amazing beauty with the redwoods and the Golden Gate Bridge and the eucalyptus trees and all kinds of things in the San Francisco Bay Area. But where my heart really just would light up is when I would go to Lake Tahoe. So I had grown up skiing in Pennsylvania on very small little hills. And when I moved to Tahoe, when I moved to California, I would visit Lake Tahoe because it was about 3 or 4 hours away. And I would ski. And I really started connecting with the mountains there. And I would spend every winter as much as possible in Tahoe. And it was kind of like, I don't know, I would just connect. It's what I'm talking about on this podcast, the power of nature. It's like I connected with my soul, my deeper knowing. And yeah, I was on a groomed mountain at a resort, but to me, the moments of nature when I would ski, and then later I switched to snowboarding because I liked the natural feeling of snowboarding more. There was kind of like a more natural rhythm for me where I would just be in the trees and see the birds or feel the falling snow with the mountains around me and the stillness and the quiet. And it changed me. It changed my energy. So I spent as much time as I could there. And then there was a time where I moved back to Pennsylvania. My dad died and I wanted to be closer to my mom. So I moved back to Pennsylvania and I tried to connect with nature as well as I could during that period. But I struggled because I really loved the alpine nature experience, and I didn't really get that in Pennsylvania, but I did connect with it as much as I could, and we lived there for 8 years, and then my mom passed away, and we moved my husband, my kids, and I. My husband that I had met in California, and then my kids that had been born in Pennsylvania. We moved back to California. I wanted to move back to the West Coast, and so we moved back to California. And then I started going up to Tahoe a lot, again snowboarding, and just getting up there even in the summer and the fall. And we wanted to move there, but it kind of didn't work out. And then I would find myself just like driving around the Bay Area and just like fixating on conifer trees and, anything that kind of reminded me of like big mountains. and I really didn't even know what to do other than thinking that meant move to Lake Tahoe. But moving to Lake Tahoe wasn't in the cards. But in 2020, we came to visit Montana. We rented an RV and came to visit Montana. We thought that we would be able to move here then because we came to visit and we fell in love with this part of Montana. And it was just completely random to come here. And but there was something about it that really resonated with us, but it wasn't in the cards for us to move then. And so it wasn't until 2021 that we ended up, a year later, we ended up finding a house that we live in now, and closing on a house, and then moving into that house in early 2022. That we've since been residents of Montana. But if someone said to me, you're going to move to Montana when I was living in California or in Pennsylvania, I'd have been like, no. I didn't even know anything about Montana. The most I knew about Montana was a previous I was the CEO and founder of a technology startup, internet startup in the first .com days. And one of my investors, Silicon Valley investors, after a period of time, he moved to Montana, and I had been aware of that. So I knew about that. I knew about Montana because of HGTV, had a dream house, and kind of like it woke me up to Montana and how beautiful it was. And then we came here to visit on a whim. But I feel like the other thing is that all my life, as an adult at least, I loved watching kind of Hallmark movies about like people living in the mountains and kind of like the Western lifestyle. And so I feel like there's a way in which this life in Montana has kind of been calling me by my feelings my entire life, even as a child. It was always calling me to move to the mountains, calling me. I just didn't know what that meant. And over the course of my life, it's like I've been following the breadcrumbs of really my heart and my soul's calling to live in a place where I can really have this deep connection with nature all around me. And now it's kind of amazing because where we live now, I not only have these amazing mountains and this amazing kind of like mountainous, lots of trees and conifers and all that, but I also have horses, which I never thought I could kind of combine those two. But I do have that. I have horses and we have the mountains, and we also have these amazing lakes around us and all kinds of stuff. And what I find is that the more that I immerse myself into just being in nature, just being in this beautiful place where I live, or following what feels right to me through my connection to nature, because that is what has led me to here. And that's what led me along this whole journey that I've been describing, that it has been the most empowering thing. It's like my heart calling my heart. It's like my heart speaking to me. And nature is the language, and nature is an avenue through which I feel a sense of major connectedness, peace, and so much more that I can't even put to words right now. So that's what this podcast is about. And if you resonate with any of my story, or with the idea that nature has had an effect on you, no matter how small or big, or maybe you're at the start of your journey, or of learning about nature and why you're drawn to it, or maybe you've been, a lifelong nature lover that is looking to just continue to include nature in your life and explore the power that it gives us all. That's what this podcast is about. And my intention with this podcast is to share some of these stories and share some of these experiences that I've had, and also talk to other people about their experiences. And maybe that will resonate with you. Maybe it will inspire you to follow your path in nature, or follow your path to more of a connection with nature, or pursuing a lifestyle that allows more of a connection with nature. Because I feel like there is such a profound effect that nature has on us and our own sense of connection, deeper connection with ourselves and our heart and our souls and our bodies and our well-being. And that's why this podcast is called The Power of Nature. And that's what I'm going to be exploring in this show. So I'm going to sign off on that for today's episode. Until the next time. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Power of Nature podcast. To learn more about me and my other offerings, you can visit my website at michellewaldo.com. That's MICHELLEWALDO.com.